This is Asian Insider, and I'm Nirmal Ghosh. Now, today we look again at the new or novel coronavirus that emerged from the Chinese city of Wuhan and has spread quite rapidly across the region. Thus far, thankfully, less lethal than SARS, which emerged in 2003, but this one has spread faster than the SARS virus. Now, questions have arisen as to China's response. Certainly, Chinese scientists did a remarkably swift job of identifying the genomic sequence of the virus. And China has been taking quite drastic measures to curb the spread of the virus and also provide medical care for those affected by it. This has drawn praise from many for the Chinese system, so to speak. But according to a January 29 report in the New England Journal of Medicine by authors from the Chinese CDC, the Centers for Disease Control, something like 7 healthcare workers were already infected in early January, and the public was not informed until past mid-January. People were still told there was no strong evidence of human-to-human transmission, when in fact there was. On the line today is the Straits Times Global Affairs correspondent Benjamin Kang, who is based in Beijing and has in fact worked in China and Taiwan as a journalist for almost 4 decades. Benjamin, thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Nirmal.
Ben, what are you seeing from there? What is your takeaway from China's response in terms of reporting the virus and curbing its spread? Not the medical part, which we know they did very quickly compared to 2003. But what about the machinery kicking into gear to curb the spread of the virus?
Right. In any epidemic or, in any country, it is, of course, it could be chaotic, right, in the beginning. And so in Wuhan, of course, we cannot rule out the possibility that local officials have tried to cover up or play it down. And in the beginning, of course, the Wuhan officials have defended themselves, saying that they were initially not authorized to confirm cases, and it was the central government. They also said a dearth of testing kits, delayed testing, right? Delayed confirmation. So it's been quite chaotic, right? But I think it is all under control.
And in terms of the general public in China, the perception of the general public, in normal conversation and as well as online, what is the online conversation, for example, about China's response? Because there are these allegations that the nature of the government, the top-down system, is very heavy on protocol and bureaucracy, may have delayed it. These questions have arisen. So what is the mood and the questions out there?
Criticism on social media is inevitable. But we see that there's no widespread panic. There's no widespread chaos, and most people are staying home, taking their cue from the government. But I think the situation is pretty much, under control. The government, of course, has pulled out all the stops, and so including scrapping all overseas tour groups, including building a hospital with 1,000 beds in 10 days. And they also put the Hubei province under lockdown, and Hubei has a population of almost 60 million. So what the government is trying to do, aside from quarantining people and treating people, is to avoid panic, right, and chaos. When I say panic and chaos, I mean widespread. There are isolated incidents, but that is also expected.
So is the general perception of the Chinese government positive, that they have done well?
The government, of course, there has been criticism that the government is playing this down and covering it up. But overall, I think the government has been doing an okay job, even though there's criticism. They have been praised by the WHO, saying China deserves gratitude and respect. Chinese leaders have expressed confidence, but during the most recent Politburo meeting, the leadership admitted shortcomings and difficulties, right? But I think this, for me, this is a sign of humility, right? Alternatively, China could say nothing. They could thump its chests, and say they did a great job, or they could admit failure, right? But China's in a difficult position. It's like it's damn if you do, damn if you don't. Doesn't matter what China says, there will be criticism.
So from outside China, it's interesting when we hear reports of a hospital built in 10 days and this massive lockdown and so forth. There is this impression that the Chinese government has a system where it can pretty much do anything it wants, and it does it very well when the entire system gears up. And of course, there's the counter view that there is this propensity to cover up because of fear of higher ups and so forth, fear of losing face, a bad reputation. What is your take on this?
It's hard to tell if the government deliberately covered up, but I don't think the central government would do that because back in 2003, SARS, 2002, 2003, the Beijing mayor and the health minister were sacked after attempting to cover it up. So this time around, I don't think it's the central government which is deliberately hiding things or covering it up, but I think we can't rule out the possibility that the local governments, are covering it up. But it's hard to say.
The Chinese system does facilitate this incredibly quick and comprehensive, holistic response, right?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party has trumpeted its political system, saying it's superior to the Western model. And for many Chinese, this is evidence that their system works and that it is maybe superior to the Western model.
What is the perception in China in general about the nature of this crisis? Is it seen nationally as a massive test for the government and for President Xi Jinping?
This is the biggest and latest crisis for President Xi Jinping, who grappled with a slowing economy last year, months of unrest in Hong Kong, a trade and tech war with the U.S., and accusations that it detained up to 1 million Muslim Uyghurs in the campaign against terrorism. But there are a lot of conspiracy theories, which I'd rather not get into here, because some of it are just, difficult to believe. But the Chinese are naturally paranoid, and they are very suspicious of what other countries, say and do. But that said, China has survived a lot of crises, and not just in recent years. Take the Great Leap Forward, for example, when they tried to catch up with the UK and surpass the UK and catch up with the US and build, steel in backyard furnaces. Farmers, peasants, stopped tilling their lands, and as a result, 30 million starved to death. It was a man-made famine, right, but they came out of it.
Interesting. And you mentioned the slowing economy that President Xi Jinping has had to grapple with, the unrest in Hong Kong and so forth. All this has had an impact. And now this is having an impact on the region. What about the economic impact of this virus crisis in China?
We don't know the whole picture yet, because this is not yet over, but some economists are predicting that it'll shave 2 percentage points off China's GDP growth, which the government has yet to say how much GDP will grow by this year. They have yet to set a target, and they're expected to announce the figure in March during the annual full session of Parliament. But we expect the figure to be around 6%, right? GDP growth this year. And so if you shave off 2 percentage points, then that would mean that the economy will grow by 4% this year.
Okay, and another issue which has come up is racism and discrimination. Well, actually just racism. I mean, we've had more and more anecdotes of people facing people who just look Chinese, according to people outside China, facing discrimination and racist taunts about carrying the virus and so forth. And we've had, respected magazines like Der Spiegel in Germany, for example, putting on the cover a picture of a person in a suit and saying "Made in China," the coronavirus made in China. And the Chinese government has gotten pretty upset about it as well. And this is happening abroad as well as in China, I believe. So could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Right. Of course, social media, Chinese social media users are riled. For example, there's this Danish newspaper which published a cartoon with the Chinese flag, and instead of the 5 yellow stars, they had 5 coronaviruses. And we also have the British newspaper calling this pandemonium instead of pandemonium. For Western media, maybe this is it's cynicism, it's trying to be funny, it's sarcasm, but it doesn't go down very well with the Chinese, who have for more than a century they feel that they've been bullied, looked down on, and they have this phrase, they coined this phrase called the century of humiliation. Which started in 1840 when they lost the Opium War and had to cede Hong Kong to Britain, and then lost the 1894 to 95 war to Japan and ceded Taiwan to Japan. So many Chinese have a big chip on their shoulder, and they think that the Western media is not being fair and that they are being bullied and they are victims.
So the response to this crisis, the fact that China has responded fairly well, notwithstanding the suspicion that there may have been a bit of a, cover-up, voluntary or involuntary in the beginning, this should make the Chinese also quite proud of the way they have done things, right? Because again, on social media, you have the racism and all that, but you also have people saying, "Wow, they built a hospital in 10 days or whatever it is."
Right, and they're building a second one in 13 days, in 2 months with 1,300 beds, and so it's really jaw-dropping. It's a remarkable feat, we have to admit. But I think the mood in China today it's more. I don't think it's pride or being too very proud. Can I use 6 words which start with the letter C to try to describe the mood in China today, right? First, we have consternation, fear. Then, of course, commendation, praise. Then you also have condemnation, or cynicism and criticism. But then the Chinese have also been contemplation. They've also been doing some soul-searching, hence they admit shortcomings. And then, of course, there's compassion. And last but not least is confidence.
The big C is interesting, very interesting. Now, Ben, tell me a little bit about your life there now since the virus. I mean, you're in Beijing, of course. Has it affected your life, or how has it affected your life in terms of your daily routine, what you do?
I had to cancel a lot of appointments, meetings with Chinese sources, with Western diplomats. I'm staying home most of the time, working from home, but then when I run out of food, I have to go to the supermarket, and the guard would take my temperature, my body temperature, before allowing me to enter, and I have to wear, face masks when I go out, but I rarely venture out. So life for most Chinese who are willing to listen to their government and stay home. Some of them are bored to death and they watch movies, play video games, play mahjong, card games. But I think the government the ruling Communist Party has not lost the mandate of heaven. Things are relatively they are coping and things are under control, because people are not taking to the streets, or there's a lot of anger on social media, but I think they still have confidence in their government.
Ben, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot for sharing that. Thank you for your time today, and good luck out there. Stay well.
Thank you, Nirmal.
Well, you heard Ben, the Chinese government has not lost the mandate of heaven, and the response is massive, and we can only keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best that the virus is eventually ring-fenced and contained. For Asian Insider, I'm Nirmal Ghosh.